Hello and welcome to the Armorer's Store video series on the inspection, repair, and maintenance of reels. This is part 4. If you have not done so, I would recommend that you watch part 1, which includes all the basics of testing, basic concept of how the reels work. In part 4, we'll be working on the flat reel, commonly known as the pizza box. There are two companies that have manufactured these. The most common right now is the Favero, which comes out of Italy. This is a flat reel. Obviously, if you've watched the other two segments on the reels or watched the first one, you notice that it's much larger. It's got a much larger diameter spool on the inside, and it is a 3-spring system. What is unique about the way that this particular reel works is the fact that, as we pointed out in the previous ones, the lines go through a spinning connector. In this particular design, what makes it unique is that all 3 lines are connected to the individual springs for each stack, and that's how the signal is transmitted from the connector down to the floor cord. So, in order to take this one apart, we flip it on its back. You have 4 screws. Remove all 4 of those, set those aside. Flip it back over and you remove the cover. So on the inside, as you can see, this is a much larger spool than the other 2. Replacing wires on this one is very, very easy. When you release the tension, which we'll do so in here in a little bit, you can deconnect these 3 connections on this small circuit board. Undo this clip. You notice that there's no strain relief in this end, and then just wire it through the grommet and remove it and replace it. Now, in order to remove the tension, you remove the wire guide. The thing you might want to use is a 5.5 millimeter nut driver. If you're an older armorer and used to work on visor masks, this is the tool that you use to tighten the nuts that held the visor in. So, place that on the back side of the connector using a Phillips screw tip. You can go ahead and take that out. This one's a little trickier. You have to bring it in at an angle, but it still works nonetheless. And again, the joys of using a magnetic screw is that you also can pull the screws out with it. All right. Unlike our previous segment 3, this one does not come with its own section to hold all the screws, so be sure you keep them separate. Now, in order to release the tension, you notice that I pulled the cable out far enough so that this protective coating is beyond this slot. It just comes up, and then you just let the tension go, being careful that you don't let it slide, so that end go flying all over the place. And you can hear the tension being released on the inner springs. Okay, so that's how you remove the tension off of that. In order to remove the spool, what you're going to need to do is desolder these 3 wires. Now, we're not going to do that on this particular video, but once you do that, though, what you want to do is take a length of about 6 inches of wire. Doesn't matter, what colors, whatever, and solder them to the ends of each of these wires. That's very important when you're trying to put this back together, because these wires are so short that trying to get them to all line up while you drop this down over top of it gets very difficult. If you take the wire and you put extensions on them, you can thread those through and make sure that these will all come up in the same spot. Okay. In order to remove the reel, you remove these three nuts here, and then you will pull it straight off. Once you do that, what you'll find is that each of the reels, or correction, each of the springs underneath have a wire that is soldered to the outside, and it comes along underneath a cable, a ribbon cable that connects back here to your connections at the end. So that's the internals. Notice in this particular model, which is the newer one, they have instructions on which wires go to in the sequence, green, brown, and white. Now, if you're working on older ones or somebody's replaced with cable before, that color coding doesn't necessarily hold true. So, and as I mentioned in the other one, when you pull it apart, you'll get bits of dust and in there. You want to clean that out because it gets inside and grinds on the springs and whatnot. Another feature of this one is the braking system. If you watched the first segment, I talked about the only death penalty that an armorer will impose is if somebody drops a reel cord and let it run. This particular device, as it spins, will come up and rub against the top of the case and slow that down. It also has a spring system that bounces into the connector. And when we get into the connector, we'll show you how that all works in there. Okay? So what we're going to do is go ahead and retension this, and according to the instructions on the inside, it says initial spring tension setting, minimum 9 turns, maximum 10. So we'll do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, and we'll 10. Slide that back in. Let that take our screws and our nuts. And again, I like to go ahead and start with the inner one first because it's the most difficult. All right. Spin it on initially. And we hold that in place. Now again, if you don't have a nut driver, just use a 5.5 millimeter wrench, which, oh by the way, on some foil points is what you need in order to get the barrel off. So it's always a good tool to have in your repertoire. All right, good. We got that all back together. Okay, let's go ahead and work on the connector end. Again, pull out a length, take and put a loose knot in it, and that keeps it from springing back. We have our piece of tape, which we put over the back side. This is very similar to the turtle reel in terms of how to, if you have to replace the connector, you make a strip call for a broken clip or whatnot. You take your electric screwdriver out with you. And it's very easy to get in there and pull it out very quickly and replace it. Pull that up. After one assumes that that's all done. Remove the retaining clip. Okay. And remove your other two. Now, on the inside of this, if you've seen the other segments, you know that we have the strain relief knot on the inside. Then this is another connection system that comes from the back side, and we'll get to that here in a second. the other feature is spring. Now, on this particular one, the spring has on either end, and this one is not properly installed. If you notice, this spring has a protrusion on one end and not the other. Okay, what that does is that it fits into a small hole on the side there, and that keeps the spring in place and keeps it from being sucked up back up into the reel. I have taken some apart where I have found as many as 3 springs inside the reels where they've been sucked up inside, and people just keep replacing them and not putting them in properly. So when you put this back together, make sure that you put that pin in that hole so it's retained. A unique feature about this particular, the Favero reels, is the fact that the sockets are all put on a circuit board. Now, the problem with circuit boards is that the way that the copper is adhered to the base material, after repeated uses, if you're not careful, that copper pad can lift off, okay, and break the connection. If that happens, what you can do is take the wire and solder it to the back side directly to the socket where these are in. Now, in order to do that, you're not going to be able to do that with a normal soldering iron. You need to do that with a soldering gun. One of the ways that you can do that to keep the wear and tear and the stress off of that pad is if you use a vise. For instance, if you're working on the A line, you can take a vise and you can clamp the C line in and work on that. What that does is that prevents you from having to heat up the socket as well as the vise that it's being held in. If you've seen the segment on mask and body cords when I talk about soldering the clips and whatnot, and I suggest that you use a pencil in the vise to put the clip to so that you don't end up heating up the vise as well as the part you're trying to solder. A tool that I've come up with to kind of help me if I'm working on all 3, that I can put in a vise and just hold everything in place rather than trying to clamp and possibly damage the things, is just a little block of wood with 3 wooden pins set in it at the right distances and then filed down to 4 millimeters, so that all you do is you have just slip the part over top of it like that, and it holds it in place, and you can make your solder connections easily enough. So, putting it back together, very easy. Slide everything in. Make sure that your spring is again locked into that hole. Put this back. Now, one of the difficulties with this particular system for the clip is the fact that that little wire piece in there sometimes gets a little bit difficult, and will tend to slide out if you're not careful. Okay. Remove your tape. Put your retaining clip back on. There you go. Remove your stop device. And there you have it. Now, when I put mine together for the club that I supported, I always put the handle on the same side. Okay, so, and I generally did that such that the handle was on the same side as the clip. Flip it over. Again, with this particular reel, if you have broken wire or springs on the inside, these are very difficult to repair. You can play with it somewhat, but be very careful. The stack as it comes is generally in a single unit, and that unit are held in by these 3 screws on the bottom side. They go up and they go all the way through the spring packs to hold them in place. And there you have it. And that is the Pizza Box reel. Thank you for watching this segment on reel repair, and invite you to visit our website at www.thearmorerstore.com. Thank you.